Good afternoon. Thank you all for spending your evening at our beautiful Franklin City Hall in downtown Franklin. This is a urban growth boundary update meeting about the Mays Creek Basin. I'd like to introduce myself and some of the other staff members that are here tonight. My name is Andrew Orr, and I work for the City of Franklin as a long-range planning supervisor. I've got Brian Goodwin here. He's an assistant director with our water management department. Jimmy Wiseman, assistant director for the engineering department. Kelly Dannenfelser, assistant director for planning and sustainability, and Eric Connor, also with our planning department. We have Annette Dalrymple on Zoom running support from the comforts of her sofa, and we appreciate her assistance tonight. And there are some other city members on Zoom as well. So tonight's a hybrid meeting. We have people here in person. We have people on Zoom. We wanted to make this convenient for people. We know some people like to come in person. Some people prefer Zoom with their lifestyle and what they have going on. So we want to be respectful of that. I'm going to ask that we hold questions until the end of the presentation, and we'll do in-person questions first, so people in the audience can ask their question first. And then those on Zoom, if possible, please use the chat feature, and we'll get to your questions after the in-person ones. You can also ask it if you'd like. We'll unmute and we'll enable the chat at the end of the presentation. And just so everyone's clear, the purpose for tonight is to inform you all of the Williamson County Growth Plan update that is starting off, to take questions and try and answer them, hopefully, and to hear from you all, any questions, comments that you have. And then hopefully you all will take our very short survey that we put together. We have some flyers that are on the table right outside of the room, and at the table right there behind the pillar. And there's a QR code, and you can activate the survey by using your phone and pointing the camera over the QR code. You can also go to the link. It'll just take you probably a minute or two to answer it. So please do that. There's also a link to the survey on the project webpage, franklintn.gov/UGB, and we'll put recordings from these community meetings on the webpage as well. In terms of the presentation tonight, I'm hopeful we can get through the material in 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for question and answers. First, I'll go over kind of an overview of the Williamson County Growth Plan process. I have a few slides chronicling some of the land use planning exercises that we've done over the last few years. And then I'll touch on our recommendations for specifically this area. And Brian with our water department will talk about kind of the sewer implications, and Jimmy will talk about the transportation network in this area. And we'll move into next steps. The map that you all see on your screen is 20 years old. It's from the 2001 Williamson County Growth Plan. It's the adopted map. It's Franklin's urban growth boundary. It's also all of the other municipalities in Williamson County, and all of the municipalities are shown in color here with Fairview, Brentwood, Franklin, Nolensville, Thompson Station, Spring Hill. Franklin is right in the middle in this gold yellow color, and the kind of the tannish color in the middle represents the city limits at the time that this map was adopted. So the city limits 20 years ago. And then the darker color along the periphery is the urban growth boundary. This map shows Franklin's city limits in yellow and urban growth boundary in this bluish green kind of turquoise color. And you can see kind of the difference between this map and the one on the last slide. Franklin's grown pretty much in all directions, out to the west more so, and then to the southeast in the Goose Creek area, the city has started to grow outside of its urban growth boundary. There's been a lot of growth pressure in this area. All of the communities in Williamson County are undertaking a similar process. All the cities are looking at their UGBs And some of the guiding principles that are being used amongst the municipalities are the following on the screen. There are about 10 of them. Coordination is key, making sure we're all kind of doing this together. And as the process unfolds, we all kind of have to do it together. Transparent public process is a key tenet, and that's very important to our leadership at Franklin to make sure we're doing things in a transparent way and information is available and staff's available to meet with people. And these meetings will be recorded, and those recordings will be on the project webpage. We have open office hours on Friday, and also next week, we'd like to have a more detailed conversation about your situation. We're also looking at a planning horizon of roughly 20 years, and that's what the state statute calls for. So give or take kind of 20 years is kind of that planning horizon that the state asks that we all use. Accommodate future growth in coordination with the municipality's vision for growth and population forecasts. So population forecasts is a big part of this as well. The census information, census data recently came out in the last month or so, and the city of Franklin is a little over 85,000 people, and we're growing steadily, as everyone in this room knows. Efficient and fiscally sustainable delivery of municipal services, infrastructure, and public facilities is a key tenet to this process. Making sure we can grow in a way that is fiscally sustainable and that the city can maintain over time. So that's kind of a key part. Resource protection, creating a distinct regional form, focusing on growth boundary issues and coordination, and respecting each jurisdiction's local autonomy and traditions of local planning. And then perhaps considering interlocal agreements through this process, and that's kind of yet to be determined. But regional form, I'd like to highlight regional form as well. And one example is there are parts of Cool Springs where one may not be certain if they're in Brentwood or Franklin. Is Costco in Brentwood or Franklin? It's actually in Brentwood. There are kind of some areas where our boundaries kind of rub together. And through this process, we want to keep more of a distinctive regional form to avoid those kind of situations. And we think that kind of helps with placemaking as well and identities of cities. In 2016, excuse me, as part of the Envision Franklin update, a suitability analysis was performed. You'll see this map on your screen. There are a couple different colors. The dark green signifies areas that are most suitable for development, and the red and orange signify areas least suitable for development. And there are 9 factors that went into creating this suitability analysis. And the ones that were weighted the heaviest, given the most weight, were floodplain and floodway. So properties with significant amount of kind of flood constraints are going to show up more red. In fact, you can kind of see the Harpeth River flowing through the middle. It's shown in red. And then areas with steep slopes, generally like 20% or greater, are going to show up as red. And then also areas that have sewer availability, areas where sewer is available or could be extended fairly easily. And I say easily, it's never easy. But those were the factors that were weighted the heaviest. And all of this information is in the appendix of Envision Franklin. It's roughly page 140. If you'd like to take a more in-depth look at how that was put together. But the important part is that the suitability analysis informed the creation of Envision Franklin and the design concepts. And one of the important things about the urban growth boundary is that it's used for planning purposes, for land use planning, for the planning of streets and roads. And some of the areas that showed up as least suitable because they're far away from sewer or had topographical or flood issues show up in this light green color. And you'll kind of see the UGB on the periphery is kind of flanked by this light green color. And that's what we call development reserve. And that was a design concept that was created that's basically 1 unit per 2 acres. It's a holding pattern until infrastructure is available or until these areas are more ripe for development, so to speak. And the very dark green on this map are areas of conservation. So just to point that out as well. But a lot of the Mays Creek Basin is in development reserve and in conservation. You can kind of see Mays Creek and the Harpeth River are shown in that dark green, signifying conservation. And then at the North Chapel 96 intersection, there's a little red area and a little blue area. And the little light blue is Trinity Elementary and the park. And the red area is a potential future neighborhood commercial node, neighborhood scale kind of commercial uses. But the vast majority of the basin's development reserve or single family residential or large lot. When we started this UGB analysis internally, we've got a team of engineers from the water department, from our engineering department, from parks, from fire, and we're all looking at the UGB together. Administration's involved in that as well. And we've done it by drainage basin because that's how we plan for gravity sewer extensions. So we've looked, excuse me, at each drainage basin. And as you can see, the Mays Creek is on the eastern side, and the Mays Creek drainage basin actually extends beyond the UGB. It goes farther to the east. But a lot of the UGB follows basin lines. The Mays Creek and the Goose Creek do not. So this is the map that some of you all received in the mail. We sent out mailers to properties that are either being proposed to be removed or proposed to be added into the UGB. So if there's a potential change, and I do emphasize that this is a working draft. This draft was developed by our internal staff group, looking at water and sewer issues, looking at street network, looking at land uses, looking at annexation inquiries and requests that we've received over the years and where the growth pressure is and where it's not, areas where we think we can serve, areas we think it's unrealistic to serve. So you'll see on this map out on the west side of town, there are 2 large farms essentially being proposed to be removed, the Gentry Farm and then the one that's directly to the north. And then the southwest basin, there's another area of red that's proposed to be removed that's off Carter's Creek Pike and Southall Road. And then the other big area on the map is Mays Creek, and that's probably the biggest area. And this is a zoomed in version of that map, essentially, with a few more street labels to help you all kind of understand where exactly on the map you're looking at. There are a few areas of the Mays Creek Basin that we're recommending remain in the city limits, and I'll start on the north. So on the northern part of the map, where you see the Clovercroft Road label, some of those properties are already in the city limits. Even though they're in the Mays Creek Basin, there are some properties up there in the city limits, and we respect that, and we recommend keeping those in the UGB. And also the properties on the north side of Clovercroft Road, just to the west of the railroad tracks, remain in as well. And then as you travel south, I guess you'll notice there's a little piece that's cut out along Murfreesboro Road in North Chapel. And we did that for a couple of reasons. We're recommending that we keep some of those properties in the UGB. One, because there is a neighborhood commercial node that was envisioned for that area at some future date. And we think that could be a benefit to the community and add value. We also realize that Murfreesboro Road is getting widened, and there is a desire to have a gateway into town. And we think that North Chapel Road, and then eventually when Market Street, if and when that gets extended down to Murfreesboro Road, that would sort of be the gateway into Franklin. But importantly, also, we think we can serve that area with sewer. And I'll let Brian talk a little bit more about that. So that's essentially why those areas are proposed to remain. So importantly, what does this mean for me? I think, people are probably, once they realize it's not junk mail, that they've gotten something in the mail from the city of Franklin, there's probably a feeling of anxiety or alarm. It's like, what is this? What's going on? For properties proposed to remain in the Franklin UGB, there remains potential for future annexation into the city at the property owner's request. That's generally how annexations are done. It's at the property owner's request, for better or for worse. For properties proposed to remain in the Franklin UGB, it could necessitate an update to Envision Franklin, depending. That's something we'd want to explore. For properties proposed to be removed, most of the area in Mays Creek is proposed to be removed from the Franklin UGB. So what does that mean? It means removal from Envision Franklin, the city's land use plan. It means gravity sewer would not be planned to serve this area. Williamson County Planning would facilitate a separate planning process to assign future land uses in a different zoning district for those properties. If you're in the Mays Creek Basin in our UGB, then your zoning is more than likely MGA1. There are a few exceptions to that, but MGA1 is exclusively used in those UGB areas. So if properties are no longer in a UGB, then the county is probably going to look to reassign those properties to something else. No change in property address, school zoning, or taxes. In 2017 and going into 2018, we did some outreach in the Mays Creek Basin. You all may recall that and may have participated in one of these community meetings that was held. Perhaps you'll see yourself in one of these pictures. The summary from the outreach that was done, we did a survey and we had the big kind of open house meeting. There were a few large tracts interested in being annexed into the city of Franklin, and that was sort of the driving force to even have those meetings. What we heard from the people who came out and took the survey, overwhelming desire for no growth or limited development, a desire to maintain the rural character, low density residential is most appropriate if development does occur, large lot sizes with preserved open space. Many concerns were raised about infrastructure, specifically one-lane underpasses, concerns about new schools being needed, the significant sewer extension, the massive extension to just get gravity sewer out into the Mays Creek Basin, and the land disturbances that would cause, and the inadequate roads and connections that exist today. So that's kind of what we heard. I'm going to let Brian from our water department come up here and talk a little bit about kind of the sewer concept and some of the issues that have been raised. And you can go to the next slide.
When we started this process, we were approaching it from, a 20-year horizon, like Andrew's mentioned. And we also look at it from what makes sense when we get requests for sewer service, that we can give capital improvement project requirements to those applicants or those requests that make sense, that is affordable, and a plan can be put in place that could be readily achieved. When you look at the Mays Creek Basin, as shown in prior slides, it's a massive basin. And I'm going to get to the next slide here. This was our master plan for the interceptor lines it would take to sewer that whole basin. And those are large diameter sewer mains, and the cost to get those built according to our master plan is massive. We had ran cost estimates through that whole basin, many different scenarios, pulling cost estimates from our current construction projects that we had let, and we are into 60 to 80 million just to get the piping in the ground. When you present this data to the potential developers to show them what would be required to develop, most of them, or requests that we have, they withdraw, or they don't have enough density based on the uses from Envision Franklin and based on even from our outreach programs of what is wanted in this area to ever have enough density to pay to get it built and build it in a systematically orderly fashion that we look to do here. So when we determined the line, we were looking, we did get some of the outer fringes of the Mays Creek Basin because there was existing infrastructure, lower density, we feel like that we could give them solutions to tie them on. Even when looking at some existing county subdivisions where we show mains that would go through those areas, there was a lot of opposition. You know, the residents didn't want us coming through there and running interceptors. So easement acquisition, the infrastructure cost, and just building out this massive basin just wasn't feasible. So when we get requests from availability requests, we got to look at it. Can we give that request a reasonable answer on what it would take to sewer the property? So that was a primary driving factor in how we determined the line that's been presented here.
I'll talk briefly about our transportation planning in the area. Back in 2016, with the update to Envision Franklin, we also hired a consultant to model the traffic transportation improvement needs for the area, or for the entire urban growth boundary, really. So out of that, we looked at level of service today, what the potential growth would be over the next 25 years. And that gave us some recommendations for improvements to our existing roadway network and potential new roadways that could be constructed to alleviate some of the existing roadway capacity that we have today and looking into the future. So with that, you see roads like Clovercroft Road that needs improvement, some new roads to move north and south to take pressure off of Clovercroft Road and get people to 96, which is currently under construction. And this is our current plan today. And as some of you may know, the board is considering a change to the plan, which I'll flip to. Oh, it's not there? Okay. Well, there are some changes that may be in the works. You've probably been a part of those discussions or at least aware of them. And one would involve shifting Market Street further to the west to connect with, in conjunction with the development plan that's being proposed right now to the board. So with Envision Franklin and with the growth in this area that was envisioned, for lack of a better term, we identified these roadway improvements. And if some of this area were to be removed from the urban growth boundary, we would certainly reevaluate that plan. Would all of the roadway improvements be needed? Would the new roadways be needed? And those are questions we would go back to our consultant. And since the roads were put in there based on modeling, we would model it again to see which ones could possibly be removed.
Thanks, Jimmy. So to bring things home in terms of next steps, we are working through the public outreach phase of this project. We had a kickoff meeting last month. It was virtual and it mainly focused on kind of the process. There's a recording on the project webpage if you're interested in that, and it kind of gets into more detail about the process. We presented at the August 26th Joint Conceptual Workshop, which is an informal meeting with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and our Planning Commission. The community meetings is our second community meeting, and we have 2 more tomorrow, focusing on different areas of the community. And then we have a brief update on Thursday at the Joint Conceptual Workshop to kind of give them an update on the community outreach. And if anybody would like to have a more in-depth conversation or kind of talk specifically about your own situation, we do have open office hours So Eric and I will be available in the training room, which is located at the far end of this building, on Friday and next Wednesday, the 29th, from 8 to 5. You just drop in anytime. Otherwise, we can set up an appointment or talk over the phone. On the 12th of October, we are planning to brief our Board of Mayor and Aldermen at a non-voting work session. And those meetings typically start at 5. They're non-voting, but we do anticipate kind of refining this map and showing it at that meeting. And then on the 19th, the county is sponsoring a growth plan symposium that I believe is set to be held at the Enrichment Center. That'll be the morning of the 19th. And then hopefully by then, we've got a pretty good handle on our working draft of our boundary. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen elections will be taking place at the end of the month, and we'll have some new aldermen come in. So we may need to work with them in November, but I think many of the candidates are up to speed on the process. And then all of this kind of leads up to a coordinating committee being convened, which we would anticipate that in early 2022. And once a coordinating committee is officially convened, they have 6 months to work through the adoption process for an updated growth plan. And that would be updated boundaries for Franklin and Brentwood and Fairview, Nolensville, Thompson Station, Spring Hill, and the county's planned growth areas as well. And as part of that process, that formal process, the coordinating committee will hold 2 public hearings, so citizens can come in and voice their perspectives. And the city will also hold 2 public hearings. Each city will hold 2 public hearings. So there will be opportunities. We'll update the web page as time goes on and we firm up those dates. But I did want to explain that. And we're at the outreach phase. We're trying to build a consensus. We're trying to get a boundary that people feel good about and that we believe a coordinating committee could stand behind. We do have some survey cards. Again, just a reminder, please take the survey, share your opinion. It's short. There's an opportunity for you all to make some written comments if you'd like to do that. And Annette put the link in the chat feature. So for those on Zoom, please go ahead and take the survey. The link is also posted on this page and it's on the project webpage as well. And we'll leave that open for a couple weeks. And Annette, you can go ahead and enable chat and we'll start by taking any questions or comments you all have in the audience first. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you just, as far as like changes to the master transportation plan, Envision Franklin, obviously some areas that used to be internal of the city that quite a ways now is the border possibly. When do you envision you looking at those changes or talking to expert in transportation after this is all completed, for sure what boundary is?
And forgive me, but I will repeat. I'm going to summarize your question and repeat it so the Zoom attendees can hear it as well. There's a question about how do we update our transportation plan specifically in response to the changing boundary. And once the coordinating committee is convened, they've got 6 months. So we would anticipate, hopefully this time next year, there's a new boundary adopted. And at that point in time, we would commence updates to our plans, land use plan, and Envision Franklin, Connect Franklin, and also our sewer basin plans. And I see Jimmy standing up if you'd like to respond to that. Okay. Yes, sir.
I had a question for Jimmy, back to his slide.
Okay.
Jimmy, on what you proposed on the main arteries, do you know if any development specifically along Wilson Pike that would change to make Wilson Pike wider or put shoulders on it? Do you know of anything that's been mentioned or proposed?
I'll repeat your question for the folks at home. The question was, are there any potential developments along Wilson Pike that could affect the roadway and require improvements? I guess is where we're going with that. So Ultimately, the idea with Wilson Pike is obviously to remove the one-way tunnels under the railroad, but as far as any potential pending developments, there's been nothing really. We've had some talks with folks before about some larger tracks out there, but nothing's really ever come to fruition. It's gotten to planning commissioner board at this time.
That's also a T.
It is a T-Dot roadway, yeah.
Okay. Be nice to have shoulders on Wilson Pike.
I agree with you.
Yes, sir.
I know like right now, we're in basic UGB, and I know there's some simple agreements like the fire department with volunteer or everything, Franklin and backing them up. If we were to remove UGB, does that change those reciprocal agreements, some of the services like that?
There's a question about fire coverage if properties are removed from the UGB or not. Yes, yeah, go ahead.
From my understanding, all of that is integrated, really not looking at boundary lines so much, it's more of response time. So, and with 5G and GPS systems being more and more improved, it's really seamless. It's just response time is the most important thing for those services.
You mentioned that Moore Chapel is as the gateway to Franklin, and there's some interest in that. But other than the couple of owners of land and contractors who will build on it, where's that interest coming from?
That's just sort of a kind of a community or a guiding principle that kind of Franklin Planning has adopted over the years through community outreach, through planning efforts, to have some gateways into Franklin and to have that kind of regional form that I talked about earlier. Kind of as you know, so you know you're kind of coming into town. That area, you know, Franklin, if you kind of look through Franklin, we have neighborhood commercial nodes scattered every 1.5 miles apart or so along a lot of our corridors. And this area was identified as one a long time ago, so it's been on the books for a while. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the drivers is having some sewer capacity to serve that area. And that's really a big driver for how we're looking at the urban growth boundary. And that's with Trinity Elementary right there and kind of the long-term potential to serving them, it kind of made sense to leave that node.
This seems like a leapfrog from what's being developed right now, maybe closer to Arno, to several miles of pretty low density. It seems like it's overreaching.
Yeah, so the question was about the commercial node at North Chapel Road. And with the potential Market Street extension and the development that would support that extension, you know, it doesn't make it so much of a leap anymore when the Ingraham property, if and when that were to get annexed. And again, you know, the UGB is a potentially 20-year or even longer planning horizon. So given the long-term kind of growth patterns that we've seen, we think that's kind of a logical place to have a neighborhood commercial node being at along an arterial and a collector. Ma'am?
Will there be more discussion on that? Because the meeting that we had earlier, or I don't know, 2 years ago on that development, the people around there didn't want that commercial development because everything that they were proposing, you could get 3 miles up the street on Carruthers. So will people that live here have more input to that? I very much appreciate you having these meetings for us so we can have people who can hear what we have to say.
So the comment that was raised was asking about kind of the viability of that neighborhood commercial node and asking if basically is that set in stone or is there kind of room to kind of rethink that intersection, if I'm paraphrasing correctly. And, you know, I would encourage you and everybody to take our short survey. That's kind of the main way we're trying to collect feedback. We've noted your concern there. This process is basically just about the boundary. We're not really changing colors on the map at this point. But there is some interrelation as you pointed out. And in our planning documents, that is identified as a neighborhood commercial node. But in this process, we're not really looking to amend the Envision Franklin map. It's just about the boundary. Any more questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, so to date, we have a working draft, and that's what it is. It's a working draft. We're getting feedback on that. We have an internal working group made up of Brian and Jimmy and myself, a representative from our administration, Parks and Fire. And after we go through the public meetings and open office hours, we're going to look at the feedback. We're going to check the survey results, and we'll fine tune the map. Essentially, we have to put something forward that the coordinating committee can support, that our decision makers, our local decision makers can stand behind and support, that's based on analysis and infrastructure and the ability to serve these properties. So what we have so far is a staff created working boundary. And we wanted to create something for the community and for the decision makers to react to, and then we can fine tune it from there. So it doesn't really fall on any one individual. I can tell you we've worked kind of collaboratively as a committee, but we all have bosses. But we're trying to build a consensus, and we realize we're not going to make everybody happy, but we're trying to get as much feedback as we can and try and put something together that by and large people support. Ultimately, the coordinating committee, and I appreciate that, Eric. Ultimately, the coordinating committee votes to adopt the growth plan. The coordinating committee has not been established. It has not commenced yet, but the state law prescribes, the membership of that coordinating committee, who serves, basically what positions serve on it. There's a little bit of discretion there with appointments. But once that committee is convened, which we would anticipate early 2022, then the information that we're preparing, we're going to pass on to them. Okay, well, if there are any more questions, we can get back to you all, but we'll go to Alderman Berger. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I've been sending messages, but I don't think you've gotten it on the chat. I just said I wanted to ask a question. Yeah, I wanted to go back to that Mays Creek Basin UGB recommendation slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First of all, let me go right back to something you were saying. I sort of missed it because my computer was in and out for a second. Who did you say, who's putting together the coordinating committee? When does that happen?
The state is pretty clear about the membership of that committee. We would anticipate the committee to convene in early 2022.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and who puts that committee together?
Ultimately, the county is facilitating the process amongst all the municipalities.
Okay, so they get to say who sits on that committee from our city?
There's some discretion about appointees. The city, so there's questions about the, Alderman Berger, I have to relay the question to the audience, but there are questions about the makeup of the committee. And in the first meeting, we talked a lot about the makeup of the committee. And so there's information from that August 12th kickoff meeting about the committee. But ultimately, it's the mayors of the municipalities. It's a representative from the Soil Conservation District. It's a representative from the Chamber of Commerce. It's a representative from Middle Tennessee Electric. Because we are the largest water utility district provider, the city of Franklin can provide a representative from our utility district. Our mayor will also be on the coordinating committee. And then I believe since we're the largest city in Williamson County, that the state allows the largest city in that county to appoint 2 additional members. So
good.
Franklin would have 4 members on the coordinating committee.
Got it. Okay, thanks. The other thing is, something was brought up. I have a question about this, but just for a second. That someone brought up that commercial node
Yes, ma'am.
on 96, and you really can't have a commercial node out there if there's not going to be any residents out there. No one's going to build a commercial node by North Chapel. That was only proposed because a development might have happened out there in the future. So if there was development out there, then the commercial node would make sense. If you're not going to have a commercial node, if you're not going to have residential out there, then you'd be hard pressed from a marketing standpoint to get anybody to put commercial in out there. A store, grocery store, gas station, what have you, probably. But anyway, I know we're not here to talk about that. So let me ask you something else about this map. You were proposing, recommended to be removed, the entire area in the pink?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's funny, you have that entire area in the pink removed, but what happens to Trinity Elementary School there?
So the question was, what happens to Trinity Elementary? And Alderman Berger, we're recommending to keep Trinity Elementary in the UGB. That would be the easternmost parcel in the UGB.
You want to point to that on the map?
The point would be that over time, they could potentially hook into our sewer system.
Well, it seems to me you're taking out anything before it, though. If you're traveling out east of town, we're removing a bunch of that out of the UGB, and then you're putting back in a section for the school.
The question was, I think I'm hearing you correctly, why keep the school? And the reason is, well, there are a couple of reasons. The school district typically likes to get on gravity if it's feasible and possible, if it makes sense. And I did reach out to the schools, and they thought long-term that if it was available, they would do it. There's some capacity at the North Chapel intersection that could be extended through the Market Street and through the, again, I say potential development of the Ingraham property, that there is some sewer availability that could be extended to that North Chapel intersection, but there's not a lot. So that's kind of the rationale, and also realizing that the schools may want to connect someday.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that, because the schools, they have all that property out there and they can't add on. We've talked about this before. They can't add on to it because they have no sewer. They have no ability to add on to the school, and they have all that property. So this school actually has property and could extend the capacity of that school if sewer was brought there. My whole thing with this area is I'm a little nervous looking at this area, because I think to myself, well, in order to make a decision to take or to remove this area out of the UGB, we have not done a comprehensive study of this region. We have not. We've looked at it bits and pieces. We've done a 30,000 look at it, but we've never done a comprehensive, full-fledged, comprehensive study of the Mays Creek Basin area out here, from Arnold Road straight out to Wilson Pike, all the way to Wilson Pike, and south of Murfreesboro Road and north of Murfreesboro Road. So I don't know how we get to that decision without having a lot more information. So
okay, so Alderman Berger asked a question about, have we looked at the Mays Creek Basin in a comprehensive way, or have we just been looking at it in a piecemeal fashion? And I'd like Brian to kind of answer, again, we're framing it a lot of ways in terms of availability to serve it with gravity sewer. And then secondly, also in terms of the transportation network. And, Murfreesboro Road is being improved. That's a big improvement that kind of splits the basin. But there are a lot of rural roads that remain out there that would have to pick up the slack. But I would like Brian to comment a little bit about the sewer, because I think we have looked at it pretty comprehensively, and that's part of what's directing the recommendation.
Yeah, to answer your question, Alderman Berger, we have looked at Mays Creek Basin from a sewer perspective extensively. We've took our master plan and evaluated those line sizes, and estimated those costs. And what keeps coming up due to the Envision Franklin, what's been said in outreach meetings, that you can't achieve the density needed that would support the construction of the infrastructure that is on our master planning. So when we were coming up with the line or the boundary that we've established, we were trying to keep the outer fringes that we might, sewer that's got lower flows that can go into the Watson Branch interceptor. And, like school, Trinity school system, we know the school, just like, except for example, back at Hempeck Lane, they like to tie on the city sewer systems just because expanding, they've got reliable treatment, and it makes it easier on the school district for that. So we were looking for what kind of low capacities on the outer fringes that we could serve that made sense. And just due to the limited density, based that would take place in the Mays Creek Basin, it was just not enough support the infrastructure requirements to serve the whole basin.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? I don't see any more questions from the audience. Any more questions on Zoom? I do see a question about the joint conceptual workshop on September 23rd, which is Thursday. And that will be held here in this room in City Hall on the evening of the 23rd. I don't have the time pulled up in front of me, but I believe it starts at 5. Yeah, and it just confirmed it does start at 5 on the 23rd. Seeing no more questions, I'll go ahead and wrap up. I appreciate everybody coming in person and attending virtually. Thank you for being flexible through this hybrid meeting. They're not always the smoothest to run and organize and coordinate. Please also take the survey and feel free to reach out to me or anyone in our department, and we can set up a meeting or drop by during the open office hours. And we can talk more in depth. But I appreciate your participation, and thanks for coming tonight.
Good job.